Mrs. Theresa May.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak in this debate, and I'm pleased that my first speech on my return to the backbenches should be on this topic, a topic on which I have worked both in opposition and in government, an issue on which I'm pleased to say that the government of which I was a member, both as Home Secretary and Prime Minister, took forward action, building on work that had been taken by previous governments. But crucially, of course, a topic that is of such importance to our society and of such significance. Domestic abuse blights lives, it can destroy lives, and not just the life of the immediate victim, but of those children and other family members as well. And it is imperative, I believe this is a landmark piece of legislation, and I'm very pleased that we have seen, I think, more than 40 members of this House wishing to speak in this debate. That shows the degree of seriousness with which this issue is taken by members across this House. That is a view that is shared across all parties in this House, and it's good to hear of the cooperation and collaboration that there has been, and I'm sure will continue to be, to make sure that we get this legislation right. But of course, passing the legislation is only one step. This is about changing the attitude that people take to domestic abuse. And the challenge for members of this House, the challenge for the government, the challenge for us all, is to make sure that the whole of society takes this issue as seriously as those who wish to contribute to this debate today are taking this issue. As I say, I think this is a landmark piece of legislation. It's a bill that has been described by government and indeed by charities and others involved in working with the victims of domestic abuse as a once-in-a-generation opportunity to make sure we take a step change in the approach we take to supporting victims and to dealing with domestic abuse. I'd like, Mr. Speaker, to thank my right honourable friend, the member for Basingstoke, for the work that she did and all the members of her committee did in pre-legislative scrutiny. I think they did that with, assiduously, with great care and with great commitment, and that was a very important part of the process of making sure we get this legislation right. I'd also like to thank the charities and organisations who contributed to that and who have continued to push us all on this issue to make sure that we are doing more for the victims and survivors of domestic abuse. And I would like to thank my right honourable friend, the Lord Chancellor, and the Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State at the Home Office, who have championed this issue and continue to do so, and have worked so hard to make sure that this legislation comes forward and will be carried forward, because it is imperative that this is not lost and that we are able to see this bill go onto the statute book, because this bill will affect people's lives, it will improve people's lives. And the Lord Chancellor himself referred to the figure of 2 million adults experiencing domestic abuse in the last year for which there are figures. 2/3 of those, of course, were women. Domestic abuse accounts for 1/3 of violent crime. And as one of my other honourable friends referenced in an intervention, it is estimated to cost our society £66 billion a year. This is not something that simply takes place behind closed doors and that others can ignore. It is something that affects us all. It affects our economy, it affects our society, it affects our young people as they are growing up. And one of the saddest, we've heard various comments about experiences people have had, and reference was made from the opposition benches earlier to the issue of young people and their understanding of relationships. I remember as Home Secretary initiating a campaign of advertisements about what a good relationship was. But the saddest thing was reading some of the comments that the young people, particularly young women, made when they had seen those adverts in cinemas and elsewhere. Comments like, "I didn't know it was wrong for him to hit me." This is the sadness in our society of so many people who don't know what a good relationship is and who suffer from that bad relationship and who suffer in silence. For too many, as we've heard, for many years suffer in silence before any action is taken. I will give way to the honourable lady.
I do think, and I'm awfully sorry, but I'm still tempted to refer to the Right Honourable Lady as the Prime Minister.